God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can move over.
First order of business, of course, is to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Oh, there you are. Second.
Moved and seconded.
Ms. Walter.
I heard once that there was a possibility of an addition to the agenda.
I think it was already put on there under
Okay.
action item number 2 on our new agenda.
Yeah.
Michelle put it on already, or somebody did.
Okay. Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. We need to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, and I did notify Michelle with the 2 corrections, minor corrections on file number 7, changing the date, and then I questioned the signature, but it makes sense that Fred would sign it, since we're approving them today. So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with that 1 correction.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Motion carried. Okay. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment at the beginning of this meeting? Okay, we'll move on. John, you're up.
Hit the button there, John.
There you go.
Am I live?
You're live.
Or am I Memorax? All right. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, John.
I would like to discuss a grant opportunity with you guys this morning. In your packet, you should have information about Minnesota Department of Health Home Visitation Grant, or Family Home Visiting. This is an opportunity for Houston County to join an existing family home visiting project with 7 other counties in the region. The Department of Health is really encouraging counties to consider what's called evidence-based projects for family home visiting. What this is it's identifying potentially at-risk families and providing a great deal of support and connection as a prevention measure prior to there being problems that would arise later in a child's life. Typically, children are identified even before they're born or right after they're born, and this project would provide pretty in-depth home visiting from a public health nurse over, what is it, the first 3 years of life? 2 to 3 years of life. Evidence-based practice is an important part of this, in that in order for something to be an evidence-based practice, you have to have had pretty rigorous standards in looking at the efficacy of a program. And so, assuming we followed that type of project, we would see similar results in Houston County. So it's something that we've been considering and kicking around as far as a preventative strategy, looking at some of the things that we've been experiencing with families that are experiencing child protection and a variety of other children's services. This would be considered a preventative measure to try and get upstream and work with those families before we hear that they're having problems and then have to intervene from a protection standpoint. This grant would be 3.5 years with the potential of re-grant at the end of it. And the other thing that's really good about it is it if we are using an approved evidence-based practice in this family home visiting, we're able to charge a higher rate for those services. So that's a built-in sustainability for it. A lot of times a county will get a grant, the state or a potential funder will help you get something off the ground, but then the county is left holding the bag at the end as to how they'll sustain that service into the future. This has an added sustainability that we can charge a higher rate for these services, assuming that we continue to use the evidence-based practice. We're also pretty well positioned in that we've planned for an additional maternal child health nurse that the board has approved, and we actually are, I think the posting for that position closes this week. We were planning that position, it's in the budget. These grant dollars, if it funds, would offset those costs, as would the higher rate of reimbursement. So, anything you want to add?
As far as the higher rate of reimbursement, from where? Who's paying the higher rate?
That's through Minnesota Department of Health and through health plans like medical assistance and things like that, depending on people's eligibility.
Okay, so nothing goes to the client, it's...
No, what it is it's a, we're able to bill for services as opposed to providing a service and just paying for it, the county just paying for it. We're able to bill for that service to health plans, to primarily medical assistance.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me either.
Yeah,
I'm glad that question was asked.
I kind of went over that quickly, but we do bill for lots of different things to many different programs.
Yeah.
Customarily, MA is one of the biggest things that we bill for, and so this would allow us to bill a higher rate because it's a different kind of service, presuming we have fidelity with the program, do the training and the like.
Was this a block grant or a competitive grant?
It's a competitive grant.
So if we don't get the grant, we don't do the program?
I'm not sure. I think we still want to look at some sort of home visiting. I think that the strategy is something that we have been exploring and should be looking at. And really what it is it's intended to look at how do we get ahead of the stream with some of these deeper end services like child protection costs, out-of-home placement, those types of things. And so it's a strategy I think we should be looking at. The grant obviously is an opportunity for us to get an approved curriculum, get the training, and also join with a group of existing counties that were funded last year. The other thing that's important to note is while it's a competitive grant, it has a unique feature in that the state is really encouraging existing programs to expand to other counties. I think the Department of Health really wants to see a greater penetration of this type of evidence-based practice in family home visiting across the state. So they're encouraging those existing programs to expand to surrounding counties. So it's kind of in their interest for us to join as well, especially as it relates to the next round of grants, which would be 3.5 years down the road.
How would the visits be determined? Would we, do we watch for who had a baby, or do they?
Yeah, we would probably, what we've heard as we've talked with our partners in these other counties is customarily we receive a lot of the referrals from our WIC program. So as we're visiting families through WIC or other things where people are interacting with public health, or also some of the families that Human Services knows about. So perhaps we have a family that has gone through child protection. We've been able to reunify the family, but then we find out that they're expecting another child. This would be a great program for us to say, hey, let us come and help you through this process. Having a new child in your home is a challenging thing, no matter who you are. And so there's a variety of ways that folks could be referred to the program, but I would say those are the primary avenues, and that's what we've heard from our partners in other counties.
When is the grant going to be awarded?
The grant is due the middle of December, and so today, assuming you approve us going forward with the grant, I'd need you to sign a letter of support for the grant, because that would go into the project or into the proposal. We'd submit the proposal, and I don't know, do you know when? Is it a January 1?
I think the grant year would be in, I think it's in April or May.
Okay.
That the grant year would start.
Okay. No,
What-
may say in here, I'm sorry, Fred.
Go ahead.
But some surrounding counties are doing this?
Yes, there's
Already.
7 counties in our region that are doing this, and actually, there's 2 others, Olmsted and Mauer, in our region that aren't doing this project, but they're doing a different one, that they had started something prior to this grant round. Fillmore County and oh well. Sounds like a drummer.
Pardon?
I'm not sure where the feedback's coming from. Sorry.
I'll just keep going if you guys can
Yeah.
hear me.
Interesting noise.
Yeah.
Quick, somebody call IT.
So, our intent is to do this with our joint Board of Health with Fillmore County, because Houston and Fillmore are the only 2 counties that don't have this. As I said, the other ones had previous programs in place, so it's the other 7 counties in the region that we would be joining, and we'd be doing it as part of our joint Board of Health with Fillmore County.
Have the other 7 been doing it with county funds? Or
No.
has there been a grant?
Place to do family home visiting. I would say they probably have some sort of family home visiting. We have. It's just we haven't used this evidence-based project, and it hasn't been part of this grant. For the other 7 counties, this just funded last year, so they're actually pretty new. Some of them are just getting up to speed with their program because they just saw their money start, I don't know, mid-year of 2018. But I would guess that most counties have done some sort of family home visiting. So,
Okay.
John, what's the source of this grant? Is this the State Department of Health?
Yes.
or what?
State
Okay.
Department of Health.
Is there
So
a
what we
motion
need
that
is
needs
a
to be
motion
made?
to approve applying for the grant.
Correct.
For family home visiting.
And then
I
I've
so
got a
moved.
document, I'm not sure if Michelle has a copy of it.
You bet I do.
You're good. So I'd need signature on that letter of support for us.
So I made a
applying.
motion.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carried.
We will come back and let you know how it goes, but we'll be submitting the grant in the middle of December, and Rice County is the host county for this, so we're doing a lot of stuff through Rice, and as soon as we find out, we'll come back and let you know.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
thank you.
What is this, 13th? There we go. Haven't had to check that yet today. Tess, you're next.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Morning.
At this time, I would like to request a closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 3 to evaluate and performance of an individual is subject to its authority.
I would move to close the current session.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
I
So
would
we will move to a closed session then.
Would move that we go back in the open session.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, to return to open session. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, we're back in open session. Now,
Open session at 9:57. Mike's on.
The board met in closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 3 in regards to Mr. Rick Vestersee. I turn it over to the
Okay.
board at this time to continue.
okay, is there a motion?
I would just say that it's been stated in the past, I guess sometimes that we're elected to make the tough decisions, and in this case, it's a tough decision. But I would move that we regrettably sever employment as of November 28th. And if I could, well, I'll wait for discussion if there's a second.
I'll second it.
If it's appropriate, I'd like to offer the county's aid in moving forward after the severance of questions or things that we could assist with, if that's proper.
And I also think we need to thank you for good service all these years.
Our office will cooperate with any ongoing actions by MCIT.
That's what I'm asking. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Tess, did you have anything else at this point? No.
Commissioners,
We'll take.
it's going through the consent agenda, so I believe that the county administrator has addressed the
Yeah.
complaint.
We'll bring Aaron up and then we'll bring you back up again.
Okay. Mr. Locker?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Several items for you today. I'll be trying to move through them briefly, but if you have questions at any point, please slow me and make sure that you have the information that you need. You had some substantial packets that were delivered to you. Appreciate the time that I'm sure you all spent.
Somewhere
looking at
over
those.
400 pages. I didn't add it up, but yeah.
I would start with the wetland matter. I feel that might be something we can handle rapidly. So within the packets you received for the wetland application, you got the application itself as well as the report that was prepared by the applicant's consultant. As a result of that report, we held a technical evaluation panel meeting on site. This application is simply to determine that the wetlands were correctly delineated. It doesn't get into how they propose to move forward or if they propose to move forward in the area. It just says can the county weigh in to confirm that we are correctly looking at the wetlands in this area.
I did read through them in detail, and I had talked it over a little bit too. And I will make a motion that we will accept and approve the wetland delineation report.
I would second that.
Moved and seconded to accept that report. Any further discussion?
So you didn't delve into how many houses are now able to be built or anything of that nature?
I think that they're looking for this to be confirmed in order to move to that
plan that.
phase, yeah.
Okay.
I would suggest your notice of decision has a proposed language for a motion, and I don't know if you could consider amending yours, but it would read, the Houston County Board finds that the wetland types and delineations are accurately presented in the WHKS report included in the application. Is that essentially what you said, I believe?
So moved,
That's
that's
what-
stated.
That's what Teresa meant.
Sounds like a winner.
That was my wording, just
Second.
didn't spit it out right.
Okay. Now we have the correct motion,
Aaron, can
And-
you send me a copy of that?
Certainly can.
and is there any further discussion on that? Okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Secondly, I have two conditional use permit recommendations from the Planning Commission. The first is an application that was received from John Jordan and Ralph Zerby. This is an application for a dwelling on less than 40 acres in an agricultural district. What they're looking to do is to transition a portion of their farm over to one of their children, and in order to do that, they were looking to build a home on less than 40 acres. They subsequently went through a variance process and were granted a variance having to do with some slope issues at the site. But this recommendation here only touches on the building on less than 40 acres. There are some conditions proposed, but I'll ask if you have any questions before I present those.
No, that seemed
I
to be
read
pretty
through
clear
that
cut.
thoroughly.
I
Yeah.
did too.
The Planning Commission recommended two conditions. First, that the permit holder shall comply with all federal, state, and local laws and regulations. And then secondly, that construction shall not commence until a survey completed by a licensed land surveyor is filed with the county.
Yeah.
It would be my recommendation that the county board could adopt the findings of the Planning Commission and adopt or make a motion that incorporates the conditions the Planning Commission is recommending.
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use for John Jordan and Ralph Zuri, and with the conditions and findings of facts stated as proposed.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Did I state that right?
I think you did a excellent job.
Okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
The second conditional use recommendation from the Planning Commission is on an application from Kenneth Johnson. And Mr. Johnson's looking to construct a cabin in an agricultural district. And again, there are conditions recommended, but I'll ask if you have any questions regarding the information in your packets before I touch on those.
No.
The Planning Commission is recommending approval of this application and has recommended three conditions: that the permit holder shall comply with all federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Secondly, that the county may enter onto the premises at reasonable times and in a reasonable manner to ensure the permit holder is in compliance with the conditions and all other applicable statutes, rules, and ordinances. And finally, that in the event a holding tank is installed, a maintenance agreement must be filed with the county. This application for a cabin includes a holding tank, a solar panels for usage only within the cabin, and a loft area. All three of those components were presented during the public hearing and were considered when the recommendation was made by the Planning Commission.
Good conditions. I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for Kenneth Johnson to build a cabin in the Ag District with the findings of fact and conditions as proposed.
I'll second the motion.
All right, been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? You got anything else on it, Aaron?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
Lastly, amendments to the zoning ordinance. As you called me to come up here, I was connecting the dots that I'm only looking at 3 commissioners this morning, and I believe there's some requirements on what's required to amend the ordinance here. And I'm going to look that up if you'll give me one moment.
I think that's true. I think we need 4.
4/5.
I think we're going to be waiting till next week, apparently.
It looked like a lot of the amendments were mainly clarifications of 5 points, right? 5 conditions? 5 sections?
Yeah,
Most
many
of them were fine. I just found 6, 7, 13, 21, and 22. And it looked to me like it was mainly clarification in a lot of the language.
if you recall, during a subsequent amendment process, we changed the format, the numbering system within
Right.
the ordinance to accommodate the limits of Microsoft Word, so that it could automatically number. That worked very well for all the numbers that are part of that multi-layer list, but within the ordinance there were many instances where a reference was embedded in the text and it didn't catch all of those. So many of what is being called general formatting are simply the correction of a reference to a number that no longer exists.
Right, okay.
Well, given the fact you may not find it readily, would it be a big issue to wait until the 20th?
If you give me just one more moment, I'm on the page here where I'm.
Well, you're on the clock, too.
Yeah, that's true. Do we have I believe the language requires a 4/5 majority for an amendment.
Right.
I don't know where that leaves us here today.
I would just recommend the board table this, and we'll pick it up next week when you have a full board.
Okay, I guess I agree with that recommendation. I will offer that we are working under a deadline for this amendment process, and it needs to be done by, FEMA needs to be notified of the incorporation of these changes before December 7th, or
Okay.
there's some bad outcomes for the
We'll
county.
we'll make sure. Okay.
Okay.
That's mainly on the floodplain section and the shoreline zoning, but we get 4/5, so it doesn't
Okay.
make a difference.
We need a motion to table, I would assume, or
No consensus.
Yeah.
I'll move to table this portion on zoning ordinances until the next meeting.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to table this discussion until the next meeting
Boy, that
because we
was so
simply don't have
ready.
enough people. Yeah, so, okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thanks, Aaron.
We'll table it.
Commissioner, I don't know if you could stop by before you leave the building and sign 2 permits for us. That'd be appreciated.
You have a dotted line for me that needs to be written above, yes. Okay. Okay, next item. Oops, excuse me. Okay, Tess, you're back up here, I guess.
Yeah, for the next item, and my apologies to those joining us this morning, but pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D03 subsection 1, request another closed session to discuss strategy for labor negotiations. To the board for a motion.
I would move to close this public meeting and go into closed session.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Did we vote to open?
We didn't get a second, did we?
Yeah, I seconded it.
Okay, I didn't hear it, sorry. Okay, been moved and seconded to go back to open session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're back in open session. Now we're taking about a 5-minute break.
That doesn't matter. Just for the record, we were in closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D03 subdivision 1B to discuss labor management strategies. No determinations were made. We came out of closed session. Thank you.
Okay, moving. There we go. Moving on to action items. Approve claims, human service, and license center disbursements.
So move.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Approve resolution accepting state disaster reimbursement.
Was that in our packet, the wording for that resolution? Oh, I don't.
Yeah, I saw it and I don't remember where it is.
Okay. It probably was, right? I read a lot of stuff yesterday.
Yeah.
But I do make a motion that we accept a resolution for accepting state disaster reimbursement. We don't really need to, but we are protected by
Right.
Yeah.
putting it up.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Consent agenda, administrator actions.
I did have to make one amendment to the copy that you've passed around. Rather than two actions on behalf of the three actions on behalf of the sheriff, we're only going to do two at this point. So the two actions that we're affirming right now are amending the hire of Emily Vang as effective November 14th rather than November 12th. That was just a hiring date change based on when she was available and notifications to employers, et cetera. The new action is affirming the recruitment of another jailer dispatcher position from the current list of applicants. So like was discussed last time, last time we applied for it, we got a bank of applicants, and we will be reviewing that list and contacting someone to fill that position. And the other action on there will happen. It's the same person in the same position, but we've got some scheduling conflicts to work out before I bring that action forward for approval. So that's where we're at there.
Discussion items. Did I miss something? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have to approve the consent agenda. Okay, I'm
I'll
sorry.
make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, now discussion items. Would you like to start?
Sure. I had two big meetings last week, and the one I'm going to bring on, but I'm not asking for action on it or anything like that, because I want to get more information to you before our next meeting. But it was on the Southeast Emergency Medical Service meeting. We had a very long meeting because we are now operating in the red because people are using their seat belts. And so we don't get seatbelt money. It's dropped like 75% And that's how we fund all our continuing education, our medical consortium. And this is across, it's really an odd thing with the seatbelt anyway. We got $25 of the fine divided between the 7 regions. So it really has, we didn't get that much to begin with. We are working really hard to talk to our legislators about getting a state money for emergency medical services, because it's an essential thing, and it mainly affects the rural areas. If we can't fund their credits or provide medical directors for these ambulances and first responders, they have to close. They have to go out of business. It's required by law that they have to have the CEUs and they have to have a medical director. So after much discussion, 2 hours worth, the 11 counties that we're part of on this end discussed that they're going to ask each county board to appropriate $5,000 a year for emergency medical services. We have 9 services in our county, in Houston County. There's over 50 in our 11 regions. But we had discussion whether we should ask it to go under the sheriff's budget, if we should, or under public health budget, our general fund, or just an appropriation. A lot of the counties are thinking the appropriation because it's like historical society and library. This is an essential service. That maybe that's where we want to put it.
We already give money to those organizations. We appropriate money to those organizations.
Not to EMS. Not, well, they're asking for $5,000 appropriation.
We send it to each of the individual
Ambulance
organizations
services.
within the county
This would be a separate than the individual ones.
for the actual organization.
Right, that provides the education. So, yeah, we do, but most of the money that we give to our 9 in the county is used for their equipment, their, I don't know, I have a whole, anyway, we've cut quite a few programs that we used to do automatically for ambulances and first responders, and trying to balance the budget. You either cut or raise revenues. Well, their only suggestion is to ask the 11 counties to appropriate $5,000 a year for Southeast EMS. I can get you all the information as far as their finances and how many we have and stuff. I have included Jack on all of this correspondence to begin with, but I think we need to discuss it before we do our,
I've received a package from Mr. Hogg of the Joint Powers Board, and I will include it as an action item for next week's meeting. And based on your questions,
yeah.
it'll be in the packet for next week, and an action item for next week's meeting. And I'll get with Carol to look at just the full loop on the funding for those organizations, and show you where this fits into that.
I'd be curious what we are paying each individual one at the present time to.
We give $10,000, well, we had been giving $10,000, most recent I can find.
To what, to play?
To emergency medical services, and we've divided that amongst our volunteer ambulance services and,
First responders.
do we have 2 regular ambulance?
We have
Carol?
Spring Grove, Caledonia, Houston, and, those
Yeah.
3
Oh.
ambulances.
We'll put that together for the
Okay.
Yeah,
package
I
for next
have
week.
all that information
All
here
right.
too.
Brownsville First Responders, Caledonia Ambulance, Hudson First Responders, Hope First Responders, Houston Ambulance, Crescent First Responders, and Spring Grove Ambulance.
I know we have 9 of them, I had written down. But, yeah. Anyway, I'm just bringing it up because it was very lengthy, debated at my meeting, because every county's in the same predicament, you know. But this is an essential service that we really don't want to lose. And, you know, it's getting tougher. It's even getting tough to find volunteers who are willing to do it, you know, the time it takes and everything. But Okay, and then I had workforce development, and they're doing okay with their trainings and their appropriations and working with industries to train people who need jobs, you know. Those were my two main things.
Okay. Had an EDA meeting, and with our new leader, I guess you'd say, Bryce has taken over, and we're doing well with loans we've given out as far as payback is concerned. Probably one of the major thing that was discussed was actually brought up by Fred, and that's whether we can appropriate some of the available loan money we have to agriculture, given the fact that was it 20% from extension that predicted that 20% of current farmers would not be able to plant next year due to financial situations. And so we had quite a discussion on how we might assist in, say, somebody's traditionally grown corn and soybeans. Can they transition to another means of supporting themselves? And again, we didn't have any experts there. We didn't have any details, but we talked about people that have gone to organic, or have gone to strawberries, or have gone to some other form of farming to provide for themselves. At our District 9 meeting, that was a topic also. One talked about some area where they have developed garlic and actually a market for it. And so anyway, that was a discussion, and we need to look at bylaws and the whole legal aspect of what we can use funds for or can't. The other meeting had a Wildcat Bob Botcher Park meeting. We'll be having a public hearing on the Bob Botcher Park in terms of some ordinance changes that we have approved by committee to hopefully go forward with. The major discussion about Wildcat was to look at implementing a ability to help me, Jeff.
Looking at an online reservation system.
Online reservation. We just felt we need to have tighter ways of counting our monies. Who's camping, how long, when did they reserve, who can reserve, et cetera. Just cleaning up the whole thing. And a lot of campsites are now using online registration, and it seems to be a smooth way to do it. So, other than that, that's what I've got.
I would continue with Jack's comments on the EDA meeting. The Extension Service and the EDA are working together along with Jeff to try to figure out what we might be able to do to help some people redirect, for lack of a better word, how they use the land to make a living. We see that the traditional corn and beans thing is, in this area, we're restricted by the sizes of the acreages, contiguous acreages that we can put into crops. Just drive 200 miles west, or even 100 miles west. In fact, even 50 miles west, and you see 1,000 acres, absolutely flat land that all can be cropped, you can do that pretty efficiently. And then you drive around Houston County and you see 2 and 3 acre strips and small pieces. You can't be quite so efficient. And so we need to try to figure out some ways of redirecting our energy in this county agriculturally a little bit to try to make more efficient use of the resources that we have here. And the university has quite a few ideas in its bank, and the EDA has also dealt with these kinds of situations. We're trying to put those together and come up with some programs and some meetings and some ideas from experts that we can share or they can share with people in this county to try to alleviate some of this stuff. That's the basic idea. Jeff and Jack and Brian and I had a meeting last week. We're working on breaking the log jam on the Highway Department building project, and we hope we've got some constructive things coming there. That's about all I can say on that at this point.
I might mention too, again, going back to the EDA for a moment, had gotten a suggestion from involved citizen in the county about the possibility of a, for lack of a better term, I guess, butcher shop, processing plant, because of the number of different livestock or animals raised in the county. And Letterboers in Winona apparently has closed. And, you know, we have poultry and beef and sheep and so forth. But I was told at the EDA meeting that something is going on in Houston. Can you share anything, Eric?
I don't know a whole lot about that, but there is a place starting up over where the old Birch building used to be, on the west end of town. And, like I say, I'm not up to date on where they're at, but I understand it's coming online here fairly shortly, so.
Okay.
But, yeah, that would be something that would, I don't know, maybe they're already working with the EDA on that, I don't know.
Not aware that they were, no, Carol.
The EDA board has approved and recommended, will recommend to the county board a loan
For exactly that. Okay, because I had missed a previous meeting, and then, what's the young man's name from Houston? The one that, he ran for mayor. Tony.
Tony.
Yeah, Tony brought it up, and so I just, again, curious as to, you know, how it's moving, and that sounds good.
It's moving forward.
Yeah, he had an issue with his financing and how they wanted him to, or what they needed for collateral.
Yeah.
So he was working through that and then going to come back to.
Okay, he had, okay. Because apparently it's a complicated issue to get, you know, the regulations in order and so forth, so,
It's expensive startup.
yeah, yeah,
The coolers and the regulations for
right.
but it's something that's needed in this county.
Yeah, so if we can,
All we have left, all we really have left is
Eitzen, yeah,
And there's more and more people raising cattle and selling direct to consumers, and they don't have a place to go, so it would be it's gonna be a good thing.
good, okay.
Okay. Anyone that wants to do a closing public comment at all? Oh, okay.
I've got one when they're done.
Yvonne Krogstad, Caledonia Township. I'm a little bit concerned about the process of these ordinance updates. It's my understanding that any ordinance update needs to have a public hearing prior. And even though this section 6 and 7 and those that were addressed this morning, I'm thinking a public hearing should have been scheduled before any action. And also, I agree with Mr. Locker that it does need to be the 4/5 vote to approve any amendments. So the Wildcat and Boucher Park are being handled according to the ordinance. But this other thing that Aaron was talking about this morning have not been handled according to the ordinance, in my opinion.
I think that when it's just an amendment or clarification of language, we don't need the public hearing part. But if it's a new ordinance or new wording, new sections added, we have to do a public hearing.
Well,
That's why Boucher Park, there's
yeah.
some new wording in there, isn't it?
From what I understood from Aaron, is that it was a confused numbering system based on how they put it into form, and that this was to correct the numbering issue more so
What?
than changing.
Well, besides the correcting the number, it says revisions of findings required. That's a revision. Revisions for both the conditional and interim use. And update the floodplain map. And, you know, to me, it looks like it's major changes. And maybe no one would come to a public hearing. But I would just brought it up because I'm wondering if a public hearing is required.
I'll check into it.
Well, there was,
Yeah.
of course, a planning commission meeting that was a public meeting.
Jeff's going to check into it.
Yeah. I was under the impression that they had done that through the planning commission, but I will verify that, and if that hasn't been done, we will
Yeah.
get that scheduled.
I was under the impression that a public hearing sort of thing would be satisfied by that open planning commission meeting that was advertised. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'll verify that we've done it right, and if not, we'll fix it.
Anyone else with public comment? I saw Bruce start to stand up, and then he sat back down. Was Yvonne taking care of your?
Yvonne takes care of it.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
If
she
I
takes
could-
care of everything. Thank you.
If I could, Commissioners, I just wanted to go on record again. I sent out an email, but wanted to thank Michelle Quinn and her folks for all the work that they did through the election process. We had a close to a record number of early voting and pre-voting, and so that put a lot of burden on Michelle and her folks to get through that process, and they did a wonderful job with it, and that goes out to all of the township folks as well. I think the process itself works smoothly here, and not everyone can say that around the country, so well done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle.
Much
Thank you,
appreciated.
Michelle.
And I guess there is just one item left.
I would make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded for adjournment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.